I'll share my screen. Okay, so we started off with this shaila yesterday. Is it permissible to throw away our father's food that's going bad because he's getting older and more crotchety? Is that the word? And to prevent someone from sin, then you can. And where do we see this from? We see this from Rachel Imenu, and it was bothersome to us that Rav Sharaga seems to be contradicting himself. On the one hand, in the previous tshuva, he said that that Rachel sinned when stealing her father's terafim. By the way, the whole story of the terafim, we understand, at least according to Chazal, Lavan was using them as idolatry, and that's why Rachel stole them. There are other meforshim who understand it differently, that the terafim were endowed with some kind of magical power of a GPS system, and that this was a way of tracking where Yaakov had fled. And the reason why Rachel stole them was to prevent her father from being able to track them.
They should have just turned off the tracking.
It was like those, what do they call them? Those Apple the Apple AirTags. It was like Apple AirTags that you can.
Wasn't something Harry Potter with some sort of plant?
Could be, yeah. So anyway, but the way that Chazal understand it simply is that Rachel was trying to prevent her father from committing the sin of idolatry, and that's why she stole the terafim. Now, in the previous tshuva, Rav Sharaga was bringing that as proof that you're not allowed to steal someone's keys, even if it's for their own good. Okay, but here he's saying just the opposite. Here he's saying that you are justified in taking something away from someone in order to prevent them from committing a sin. And there is a sin of what? Of the nishmartem ma'od lenafsho sechem, that you have to be very careful about preserving your health. And anyone who commits the sin of disregarding their health, there's a mitzvah to try and prevent them from doing that. So, of course, this opens a whole can of worms. Like I gave the extreme example of, if I should then go into people's homes and confiscate their chocolate and their sugary treats and
dark chocolate could be good for you.
What's that? Yeah, this Carlos bags with all the lollipops in it. Yeah, and and I'm actually very guilty also because I give out lollipops
the kids come to the rabbi because they want to shake hands with the rabbi, not for the other person.
Yeah. I got a bridge to sell you if you believe that. Yeah.
So, Rabbi, you're saying that if you think someone is incapable of driving or in a state of not being able to drive safely, that you can't take the keys off them?
Yeah, I mean, logic dictates that if you're doing this for their protection, but of course, it's a very gray area because it's so subjective. Those of us with aging parents, thank God, the question is, at what point do you make that determination that a parent is no longer capable of caring for themselves or for driving or for taking care of their own food and things like that? It's very, very difficult to make that determination. But the issue here is that the way that the shaila is presented, the father, the children are saying the food is going bad. Our father doesn't want to throw it away. It's getting green, and it's not cheese, it's whatever it is. The cottage cheese is not cottage cheese. It's from the milk, So, at what point do you say that's it? So, and there's no baltashchis in throwing this stuff away because it's more important not for the person not to destroy his health. than it is to destroy food. Now, the Makor Baruch picks up on this and says, how does Reb Sharaga have it speak from both sides? On the one hand, he said in the previous tshuva that it's a sin to steal something or to confiscate something from someone to prevent them from sinning. Quoting from the Zohar. So he says, Ein l'Rabbeinu Hagon HaMachaber Shlita b'shut Baruch Omer, shehevi ma shekosov b'Zohar HaKadosh Parshas Vayetze, de'afal pi sherachel ganva es haterafim me'aviha, k'dei limnoa oso me'isser avodah zara, that even though that Rachel stole her father's terafim to prevent him from idolatry, mikol makom hi nensha shemesa k'sheyoldes binyamin, but she was punished for that she died in childbirth. And she did not have the ability, the zechus, the privilege of raising her child or even living with him for even a short period of time, biglal shetziara es aviha, because she caused pain to her father. He says, "V'zeh oynesh mida keneged mida." This is a tit for tat punishment, he says. In other words, if you cause a parent pain, Hashem will cause you to be separated from your child. Because you created separation from your parent, you will be separated from your child. Go ahead, Hal.
But she died because of that, or because Yaakov cursed the person that stole it?
Well, there's two ways of looking at it, I guess, right? Rashi says that, not quoting the Zohar, but Rashi says, quoting the Medrash, that Yaakov, that the curse of a tzaddik, even when it's conditional, will come true. So a tzaddik has to be very careful about his wording, because he said that whoever stole these will die or will not live. Gonev lo yichya, he said, that person will not live. Even though her intent was for the virtue of eliminating idolatry from her father's house, and even though her father was evil, but she had no right to cause him pain. And God is exacting with the righteous even to a hair's breadth. So what you see from here, says the Makor Baruch, is that why was Rachel punished? She wasn't punished for the act of thievery. She was punished for the act of causing her father pain. And apparently he's separating the two out. In other words, there's two offenses that I commit whenever I steal something from you. I've taken your property, which the Torah says I'm not allowed to do, and I cause you aggravation and upset because you don't have your object anymore. Those are two separate things. So if you can separate those two out, you see that the act of thievery is not punishable because she was doing a virtuous thing by stealing from her father. And therefore you see that it is permitted to destroy something that belongs to your friend if it's going to save him from prohibition. I can take something of yours that's not kosher and dispose of it if it's to save you from a forbidden act. So if I find something non-kosher in your house, I don't even need to ask you permission to dispose of it. And here's another issue. Oh, I don't trust that hechsher. Then you go through someone's pantry, you go through someone's pantry, says, I don't trust that hechsher. It's going in the garbage. And the person says, what are you doing? You have no right. Of course I do. It's black and white. I have a right to destroy something of yours that's going to, if it'll save you from committing an Aveira. And if you eat that, you're committing it. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of zealotry that could be, this has to be mitigated very carefully. well, you don't trust that hechsher, but I trust that hechsher. What are you doing?
Mhm.
No, but if there's something, then there's a McDonald's bag in the guy's counter, then, but then, of course, the zealot doesn't check. Maybe this McDonald's bag belongs to the housekeeper, right? And so all these things could potentially
I'm
happen.
still trying in my mind to separate the not giving pain. How can you extract that without giving pain unless you replace it with something that's kosher or do something that gives the person back what they had?
Well, let's say a person was not aware that this item is treif. Let's say, that like that chicken scandal in New York that happened a few years back.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you go and you go to your neighbor's house after you hear the news and you immediately throw away all of her chicken, right? So when she gets home, you tell her, I threw away all of your chicken because I just found out that all of that chicken was treif. So she would say, thank you. Thank you for doing that because you saved me from doing an isser. I hadn't heard the news. So she would have, maybe she would have.
Maybe she could have sold it to a Korea. I don't know. Like, I mean, just thrown it away. But shouldn't you just tell her and let her decide how to address it?
Yeah, that would be the right thing to do.
Like I was thinking, like if you find a tray chocolate bar, you buy a kosher bar and replace it, then they're not in pain and you've saved it.
Yeah.
Like I'm just trying to segregate those two aspects.
But the fact is that even first of all, my response to you, Paul, is you can create scenarios where a person would not be pained by having something that they didn't realize was harmful and having it disposed of. But even if not, the fact is, the question is, when you look at the text of the Zohar, Rachel is not being punished for stealing. She's being punished for causing her father pain. And so what Rav Sharaga is inferring from that is that it's permissible to steal from someone if it's to their benefit, okay? And that, again, it sort of contradicts the previous tshuva that we were learning.
Yeah.
And so we have to figure out why Rav Sharaga was more machmir in the previous tshuva, and over here he's completely lenient. Perhaps it's because, obviously the two cases are different. The previous shaila that he was dealing with was you want to teach the guy a lesson. But so stealing the keys of the safe from him is not saving him from committing an isser, but it's preventing him from perhaps future negligence that could cause damage to the company, and it's caught teaching him a lesson.
Hmm.
So maybe that doesn't rise to this level. But here, when there's direct isser that you can save a person from, okay, so let's go on now. So that's the first point. Next point is osbeis. Uli inyan hashe'ela liskor lo dira v'lakachas kesef mimenu l'lo yediyaso v'haskamasa. The second part of the shaila, if you'll recall, was that the children of this aging gentleman would like to relocate him and to have him vacate his current apartment, even though he doesn't want to leave, because he thinks that the rent is too darn high in the other place where they want to move him to. And they want to move him to this other place so that he'll be next door to his daughter, and his daughter will be able to take better care of him. Okay. And he's saying, no, I'm not going to pay the higher price. And they say, and they lie to him and they say, what are you talking about? It's the same rent that you're paying now. And what they're going to do is they're going to withdraw money from his bank account without his knowledge, because apparently one of them has power of attorney. Afilu shezel tovasa, even though it's for his own good. So is this permissible or not? So tzrichin lekabel al ze ishur mi beis din. So Rav Sharaga paskins that in order to do this, they would need to get some kind of independent beis din to put their approval on this effort. Kamosha Hamishna Omeris B'Bava Metzia. And this is consistent with the Mishnah Bava Metzia. Hamafkid Peros Eitzel Chavero, Afilu Heim Avudim Al Yidei Rikavonu Chedoma Lo Yiga Bahem. That if a person receives produce for safekeeping. He's not allowed to touch them, even if they're in the process of rotting. Uladas Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel mochron beveistim mipnei shehu k'meishiv aveda leba'alim. But that's not the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. He says that you are allowed to sell the produce in order to restore the person's assets. In other words, if I just watch your produce as it's rotting, then you're going to end up losing money. But if I can save you from loss by selling the produce while it's still sellable, and then giving you cash for the produce you left with me, I'm permitted to do it as long as I do it with the approval of Beis Din. Because through the approval of Beis Din, they'll make sure that I'm not underselling, that I'm selling them for fair market value. Hooray, da'afilu b'makom shu osa chesed gadol limnoa hefsed mimamon chaveiro tzarich lekabel ishur shel Beis Din. So what you see from that is that even when you're doing a great act of kindness for your friend, even so, you need to do it with someone overseeing it other than yourself. In other words, this is not, because this is something that's so subjective. We want to take our father's money for his own benefit. We need to make sure that it's being done on the up and up, and that the Beis Din has had a chance to think about this and to look at it objectively, because we as children may be biased in the way that we're judging this situation. So that's why the halacha requires you to bring in a Beis Din to oversee it. And even if they don't know the facts that well, but the family, the kids would have to come before the Beis Din, say this is, or the Rav of the community, or sometimes that would be sufficient as well. And they would have to say, this is what we plan to do. Do we have your approval? Now, let's take a look at the footnote. What does the Makor Baruch say? He says, this is how it's paskened in the Rambam and in the Shulchan Aruch, that if you want to be able, if you're a shomer on someone else's property, and you come to the conclusion that it's appropriate to sell it because otherwise the product will go bad if you don't sell it now, then you have to get permission from the Beis Din of your city in order to do so. Now, I just want to point out that it might not, in a town like ours, where there's a lot of bureaucracy surrounding the Beis Din, and it might take a couple of weeks before the Beis Din gets back to you, then probably in a situation like this, asking the Rav of your community to act as the adjudicator or the decider, is this the right thing to do or not, would be the next best thing to do. But it does have to it does require you bringing in a third party objective voice in order to make that determination. Is there such a thing like that in the law?
Yeah, actually, this accords with the law I looked up last night. In secular law, what we're talking about is the tort of conversion. It's this civil analog to theft. So if you take this without my permission, you've converted it to your own use, called conversion. There's usually three defenses. One is if I've abandoned it, like the huge thing. And then the other one is consent, express or implied. And then the third one is this legal authority. So you mentioned yesterday, like power of attorney, that would be legal authority to take it, dad's money or mom's money or whatever it is, or go to court and get an order that allows you to do it. Or sometimes there's law and authority invested in the sheriff or the bailiff to seize this, or police officer, or the Ministry of Transportation has the legal authority to revoke licenses or whatever it is. So if there's legal authority, 18 or otherwise, then you can also get around being guilty of conversion. That's how it works.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. The fourth one is if you have an interest in my chattel, my car, or whatever, because you're a lender, there's a chattel mortgage on it, or mortgage on it, you've got pledged or whatever it is, in the default, then you would have a right to take it against my will. If you have a legal interest in the goods also. But pretty much that's how you get around conversion. That's pretty close to it.
Wow. Okay, v'lochein afal pi shehakavana tova l'tovas ha'av liskar lo dira sheyuchlu la'azor lo. And therefore, even though the argument is that it's to the benefit of the father to rent him an apartment for a higher rate so that the children can be there to help him, tzarech lekabel ishur mi beis. You have to get a court to not order it, but to endorse it. Aval im tzrichim lahotzi hotzos avor terufos avor ishpuz, ein tzarech rishus mi beis. That if, however, you need to take money out of your father's bank account, either for medication or because of ishpuz. Now, does that mean a lodging? I'm not sure if that's what it means. Let's see, what is ishpuz? Hospitalization. That's what ishpuz means. Right. If you need any kind of medical expense, that does not need to be ratified by a Beis Din. But a decision like this would need ratification of the endorsement of a Beis Din. So,
So if you're moving the parent into a location where there was medical assistance or available that was on call should something happen,
right.
knowing that they were getting to a point that was going to be required, do you still need to go to the Beis Din for that, or is that sufficient that you can make the action yourself?
So that's a really good question. Let's say you need to hire a caregiver for your aging parent, and they say, "I don't want a caregiver in my in my house, or in my, I don't need it, I don't want it." But mom, you already broke your leg and your hip or whatever, and you're going to need someone to help you around. No, I don't want a stranger in my house. Now, this is a very common thing. So what do you need to do? I don't think that in that situation, you would need to get the approval of a Beis Din. There's a lot of gray area here. But if it's clearly indicated that it's for her medical needs, then you don't need
for her care. I mean, I know in the case of Shon's mum, it got to a stage where basically couldn't look after her for what she needed.
Right.
So it was for her own well-being.
Understood. Yeah, exactly. Let's just take a quick look at what the Aruch HaShulchan says as far as getting permission from Beis Din, because he probably would be able to provide us with let's see, Reish, Tzadi, Beis, and Choshen Mishpat. So the Shulchan Aruch paskins, Osa takana lebal hapikad amenu be'ir mochen bebeis din. So you have to sell it in Beis Din if the items are in the process of rotting away. Okay, so let's take a look and see what the Aruch HaShulchan says about this. Okay. Let's see. So, Kivu. So what the Aruch HaShulchan just adds is that this halacha has applications, let's say, not only for rotting produce. He says, first of all, even if the produce has already been compromised and it may not rot any further, you still have permission to sell them because the containers where they're in will cause further deterioration of the product. And v'hamafkid chametz eitzel chavero. Let's say a person leaves chametz in your care. He gives you a bunch of bottles of scotch and he says, I'm going to be going out of town. Please watch these for me. V'higia haPesach, and Pesach is arriving. So hareza lo yigabo. So you say to yourself, well, it would be a mitzvah for me to drink these, right, before Pesach arrives. Yeah, no. So that's
He asked you to watch the bottom, not the content.
yeah. So he says you're not allowed to touch the contents. Ad shah chamishis be'erev Pesach shadayin mutar l'mochra. The Shema Yavo Habaolim, he says you can't touch it until right before the last moment that you can sell chametz, because maybe the owner will still arrive. Now, obviously, we're talking about where there's no telephone communication, but you would obviously find out from the guy, do you want me to sell your chametz, or do you want this chametz to be permanently usher? He says, if you can't get a hold of the guy, you're allowed to sell the chametz.
Allowed to or should sell?
You should. Yotzei u'mochen b'shuk mipnei hashavas aveda. You should sell it because you're saving him from loss. The gamzit tzarich limkar al pishumas based in afal pishes mano bahul. But you'd have to get the authorization from the Beis Din, which again is very difficult to do. Like, especially today, when we sell our chametz, we don't have the Beis Din estimate what our chametz is worth. We can make our own estimation, but if you're dealing with someone else's chametz, there may be a greater requirement to have a third party objectively assess the estimated value. But we don't require that generally today, because when the rabbi sells your chametz, he basically tells the Gentile, if you want to make this sale to be permanent after Passover, you agree that we'll hire someone to be an assessor of the value of the chametz. Right. So included in this sale is that there will be a future assessment made. He says, "Ve'im azman dachok she'efshar limko b'shar zu." Yimkar kodem lachein, and the Aruch HaShulchan is very practical. He says, if right before the last time you can sell the chametz, there's no time, or the rabbi announces that he's going to sell the chametz at 9:30 in the morning instead of 11:30, so then obviously you can sell someone else's chametz before. And today you just sell it via the regular mechiras chametz, and it's no problem. Okay, so we'll hold it here for today. Again, Doug, you raise a good point with that gray area. When do you need the objective third-party voice of the Beis Din to oversee the process? When do you not? When it comes to medical issues, you don't. But again, this issue that Rav Sharaga was talking about, it's sort of so gray that he says you should bring in a third party. You should bring in the Beis Din, because you may not be looking at it objectively. Okay, we'll hold it here. Have a great day, everybody, and a good Shabbos. And in all likelihood, you won't see me next week if everything goes well, because I'm flying to Eretz Yisrael. So we'll resume a week